Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind howled beyond the wall like a living thing, clawing and shrieking against the black stones of Castle Black. Snow fell in thick, drifting veils that swallowed the world, so that sky and earth became one endless whiteness. Beneath that frozen silence, the forests waited, ancient and cold, older than men or castles or kings. Sir Jarek Snow, a ranger of the Night's Watch, stood atop the wall's edge and looked northward into the storm. His cloak flapped behind him, black against the ghostly white sky. The torches along the parapet hissed and sputtered in the wind, but Jarek's eyes were fixed far beyond their light, toward the dark horizon where shadows moved beneath the storm. Still staring into the dark snow, came a voice from behind him. It was Eldon Pike, a lean man from the Iron Islands, one of his sworn brothers. "You'll find no maidens in the snow, no matter how long you look." Jarek gave a faint smile, though his thoughts were far away. "Maybe not maidens," he said, "but something watches us. I feel it." Eldon snorted and stamped his feet. "You feel the cold, that's all. Come, the Lord Commander wants you in the yard. We ride north at first light." "Another ranging?" Jarek asked. "The old man's sending us beyond Craster's Keep," Eldon said. "A scouting party found strange tracks out there, big as a horse's hoof, but shaped like nothing they've seen." Jarek nodded, though unease stirred in him like a shadowed whisper. For weeks, he had dreamed of a woman of frost, her eyes pale as moonlight, her voice calling his name from beneath the ice. Each morning he awoke drenched in cold sweat, the sound of that voice still echoing in his ears. Now, as the wind moaned through the wall's black stones, he thought he heard it again, faint and far away, like a song sung by the dead. The next morning, 12 men rode out through the haunted forest. They were black shadows against the snow, their cloaks fluttering like ravens' wings. Jarek led his horse through the drifts, his gloved hand tight upon the reins. Around him, the trees stood heavy with ice, their branches drooping like the bones of giants. By nightfall, they reached the ruins of Craster's Keep, the charred timbers and broken fence posts half buried in snow. The air was still, the silence heavy as a shroud. "7 hells," muttered Benrick, a squat, scarred ranger. "This place gives me chills worse than the wall." "Burned out by our own brothers," Eldon said, dismounting. "Craster's ghosts won't trouble us. It's the living we should fear." They built a fire beneath the ruins and huddled close for warmth. The flames danced on the snow, throwing long shadows across the trees. Jarek sat apart, cleaning his sword, Frostbane, its steel glimmering faintly blue in the firelight. "Dreaming again, Snow?" Eldon asked. Jarek looked up. "Aye, the same one. The woman of frost. She calls my name." Eldon chuckled uneasily. "Maybe the wall's turning your blood to ice. Stop thinking on her. There are no women north of the wall worth dreaming of." But Jarek only stared into the dark, the dream still whispering at the edge of his mind. At dawn, they pressed deeper into the wilderness. The trees grew thicker, the light dimmer. The air itself seemed to grow colder, so cold their breath froze in the air like misty ghosts. They followed the strange tracks the scouts had found, huge round impressions half buried in the snow, each rimmed with a faint frost that never melted. By midday, the tracks led them to a glacial ravine where the snow lay untouched for miles. There, beneath a cliff of solid ice, Jarek saw something that made his blood run colder than the wind. A door. It was carved into the ice itself, ancient, smooth, and rimmed with symbols none of them recognized. At its center was a black shard of obsidian, no larger than a man's fist, set deep within the frozen wall. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, casting thin threads of blue light across the snow. "What in the name of the seven is that?" whispered Eldon. Benric reached out with a gloved hand, but Jarek caught his wrist. "Don't touch it." "It's only ice," Benric said, frowning. "Some wildling trick, maybe." "No," Jarek murmured. "This is older than the wall itself." The others shifted uneasily. "Let's mark the spot and return," said Eldon. "We can tell the Lord Commander what we found." But Jarek stepped closer, drawn by the faint hum in the air, a rhythm that matched the pulse in his own veins. The symbols around the door shimmered as he approached, and for a heartbeat, the ice seemed to breathe. He heard the voice again. "Jarek." "Seven save us," whispered one of the men. The ice cracked. A thin fissure split the air with a sound like thunder. Frost spread outward in spirals, and the ground trembled beneath their boots. The men staggered back as the door flared with blue fire, and the black shard pulsed faster, once, twice, thrice, before the light vanished. Silence followed. Only the whispering wind and the slow drip of melting ice. "Jarek," Eldon said hoarsely. "What did you do?" Jarek stared at the door, heart pounding. "I think," he said, his voice a whisper, "we woke something that was never meant to wake." And far beneath the ice, in the endless dark, something stirred, ancient, cold, and watching. The White Walkers did not move that night, nor the next. They waited, as they always had. But their queen had heard her name again, and the frost began to rise. The storm rose that night, fierce and blinding. Snow came down in waves that swallowed the world, erasing every track and every tree, until all that remained was white silence. The 12 rangers huddled in the ruins of Craster's Keep, the wind moaning through the blackened beams. The fire sputtered, fighting for life. No one spoke for a long while. Jarek sat apart, staring into the flames, his thoughts tangled with what they had seen. The image of the door in the ice burned in his mind. The smooth surface, the black shard that pulsed like a living heart, and that faint whisper calling his name. He remembered the way the ground had trembled when he stepped near it. Something vast and old had been beneath that ice, watching, waiting. "Snow." Eldon's voice came softly through the crackle of fire. "You've been quiet since we found that thing. Don't tell me you believe in ghost stories." Jarek looked up, the orange light flickering across his pale face. "What we found wasn't a story." Eldon shifted uneasily. "A relic, maybe. Old magic. The first men had their share of strange rites. It doesn't mean." A scream cut through the wind. All 12 men sprang to their feet, hands going to their swords. The cry had come from outside the ruin, shrill and human, cut short as though swallowed by the snow. Benric was the first to move. "Stay with the fire," he barked, and darted into the blizzard. 2 others followed before Jarek could stop them. He snatched up his sword and ran into the storm. The snow clawed at his eyes. The wind howled in his ears. He could barely see 2 paces ahead. The world was a white void, endless and deadly. "Benric," he shouted. "Where are you?" No answer, only the wind. Then he saw a dark shape ahead, half buried in snow. He stumbled closer and froze. Benric lay on his back, his eyes wide and glassy, rimmed with frost. His sword was still in his hand, but the blade was coated in a thin rime of ice. His mouth hung open, as though he had tried to scream, and the sound had frozen in his throat. "7 hells," whispered Jarek. He reached to close the man's eyes and flinched back. Benrick's skin was cold as stone, his flesh already stiff. But he had only been gone a minute. The other 2 men were nowhere to be seen. The storm howled louder, and through its roar came another sound, a faint, rhythmic crackling, like footsteps on ice. Jarek turned slowly. There was movement in the white. Shadows. Tall, thin shapes walking without sound. He backed away, heart hammering. The fire. He had to get back to the fire. The shapes drew nearer, pale figures with eyes like blue fire. The White Walkers moved like ghosts through the storm, their armor glinting faintly, their weapons of frozen crystal in hand. Jarek stumbled and ran. The wind tore at his cloak as he plunged through the snow, back toward the ruin. The light of the fire flickered ahead, tiny, weak, but still there. He burst into the shelter, slamming the broken door behind him. Eldon and the others turned, blades drawn. "What happened?" "They're here," Jarek gasped. "The dead walk." The men cursed and grabbed their weapons. They piled wood onto the fire until the flames roared higher. Outside, the wind shrieked and something struck the walls, hard, heavy blows that made the beams creak. A face appeared in the gap of the doorway, pale as moonlight, eyes burning blue. One of the men thrust a torch toward it, and the creature hissed, retreating into the snow. "They fear fire," Eldon said. "Keep it burning." For hours they held there, guarding the fire while the storm raged. Shadows moved beyond the walls, circling, waiting, but they did not come closer. When dawn broke, the wind died, and the world outside lay still. The tracks they found in the snow were not of men. Each was long and sharp, like the mark of a claw. 3 of their brothers were gone, and Benrick's body lay stiff and pale by the fire. His eyes had turned the color of frost. "We ride for the wall," Eldon said. "Now." But Jarek was looking north. The ice door was that way. He could feel it, like a heartbeat calling through the cold. Something had changed when they found it, something deep and ancient. The walkers had not attacked the wall in thousands of years. Why now? Why follow them unless the thing they had uncovered mattered to them? "We have to go back," he said quietly. Eldon turned to him, disbelief in his eyes. "Back? You've lost your wits. We'll be lucky to reach the wall alive." "Don't you see?" Jarek's voice was low but fierce. "They were guarding it. That door wasn't hidden by chance, it was sealed. Whatever's behind it, they fear it. That's why they wait. That's why they've waited for ages." Eldon hesitated. The men were weary, terrified, but something in Jarek's words rooted them. Fear and curiosity wove together, sharp as wire. Before anyone could speak, the ground shook beneath them, a low rumble that came from the north. Snow fell from the trees in heavy drifts. The sound was deep and distant, like thunder under the earth. Jarek looked to the horizon and saw a faint light there, blue and pulsing, the same color as the shard in the ice. "She's waking," he whispered. They left the ruin before midday, heading north again despite Eldon's protests. The light guided them through the storm, faint and cold. The further they went, the more the air seemed to hum, a steady, silent vibration that set their teeth on edge. When they reached the ravine once more, the door was no longer sealed. The ice around it had melted into a mist, curling like breath from the mouth of a dying god. The black shard still pulsed faintly, but cracks now spread outward from its heart, spidering across the surface. And on the ground before it lay one of their missing brothers, alive, but pale as snow. His lips moved soundlessly. Jarek knelt beside him. What happened? The man's eyes fluttered open. Frost clung to his lashes. His voice was little more than a whisper. She called your name, he said. She remembers you. Then he went still, and the last pulse of warmth fled from his skin. The others stared in horror. Eldon's face was white as bone. Who called you, Jarek? Jarek rose slowly, his breath misting in the frozen air. He looked at the cracks running through the ice, at the light seeping out from within. I don't know, he said, but she's been waiting a very long time. Behind the ice, something moved, a shadow vast and graceful, like a woman's form taking shape in the frost. The air grew colder still, so cold their tears froze on their lashes. The first sound came like a sigh, soft, ancient, and sorrowful. Then the whisper again, clearer now, echoing through the frozen valley. Jarek, come to me. The rangers stumbled back, but Jarek stood frozen, his sword trembling in his hand. He felt the pull deep within his chest, older than memory, stronger than fear. He knew then that whatever lay behind that door was bound to him by blood and fate. And somewhere beyond the mountains of ice, the White Walkers stopped their march, turned their heads as one, and waited once more. They built a small camp that night beneath the shadow of the icy ravine, though none of them slept. The cold seemed alive there, pressing in from every side, seeping through furs and leather until the marrow of their bones ached. Even the fire struggled to live, its flames burning low and blue, as though the very air resisted warmth. Jarek sat apart from the others, his eyes fixed upon the ice door that loomed beyond the mist. The cracks upon its surface glimmered faintly in the starlight, widening with each hour. From behind that veil of frost came the whisper of shifting forms, the faint echo of movement too slow for mortal sight. Eldon crouched beside him, his face drawn. We should flee while we can. This place is cursed. You saw what became of Benric and the others. Jarek did not look away. If we leave, whatever is in there will still wake. Better we know what we've unleashed before it crosses the wall. Eldon cursed softly and spat into the snow. You speak like a fool chasing doom. The dead are stirring snow. The walkers know this place. Maybe they guard it, maybe they fear it, but we are neither their kin nor their keepers. We're men of the watch, not heroes of old songs. Jarek's gaze drifted to the dark forest where faint blue lights pulsed like distant stars. Maybe the watch was founded for this very thing, to hold what the world has forgotten. The wind rose, moaning like a lost soul through the ravine. From the ice came a faint sound, a heartbeat, slow and deep. The other rangers stirred, eyes wide with terror. The ground trembled softly beneath their feet, and flakes of snow drifted from the cliffs above. Then a crack split the silence. The obsidian shard in the center of the door flared bright as lightning, and a thin jet of mist hissed outward. The men staggered back, drawing their blades though they knew not what they could strike. The fissure widened. Ice splintered and fell away in sheets. Beneath it lay a wall of crystal so clear they could see shapes moving within, vague outlines like twisted roots or limbs. And at the very heart of that frozen tomb was a woman's figure, tall and graceful, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair a web of silver frost. Her eyes were closed, but as the last of the ice melted from her face, her lips parted in a sigh that froze the air itself. The rangers stared, transfixed. Even Eldon took an involuntary step forward. She's beautiful, whispered one. Jarek's voice was barely a breath. She's death itself. The woman's eyes opened. They were not blue like the walkers. They were white, depthless, and glowing with cold fire. She looked upon them as though they were motes of dust upon the wind. Then her gaze fixed on Jarek, and for the first time in his life, he felt his heart falter. "Jarek, you came." The voice was not sound. It filled his skull like an echo from his own blood. He staggered, clutching his head. The others saw it too, the shimmer in the air, the frost creeping across the ground, spreading from her tomb. Eldon shouted something, but the words froze on his tongue. The woman raised one hand, and the remaining ice shattered like glass. She stepped forth, bare feet upon the snow, leaving no prints behind. The world grew silent around her. Even the wind stilled, as if in reverence or fear. Eldon moved first. He drew a torch from the fire and thrust it toward her. "Back, witch!" The woman's pale eyes flicked toward him, and the flame died. Frost climbed up the torch's shaft, swallowing his hand. Eldon screamed, stumbling backward as the ice spread to his wrist. Jarek lunged and cut it free with one swift stroke, his blade flashing in the dim light. Eldon fell to the ground, clutching his stump, gasping. "She's cursed!" The woman turned her gaze back to Jarek. "You bear his blood," she said, her voice echoing like wind through caverns. "The blood of the one who bound me. Yet you woke me all the same." "I don't know who you are," Jarek said, his breath misting before him. "Tell me your name." A faint smile touched her lips. "Names are for mortals. I was the frost before your wall was raised, the queen beneath the cold. But once, long ago, I had a name men dared to speak. They called me Sereth of the Shivering Sea." Eldon groaned beside him, eyes glazed with pain. "Kill her, Jarek, before she kills us all." But Jarek hesitated. He could feel something within him answering her words, a distant echo of power older than men. It stirred in his veins like fire wrapped in ice. The other rangers raised their weapons. "Back, creature," one cried. Sereth turned her eyes upon them, and in an instant the air itself froze. Frost bloomed across their blades, their armor, their skin. They fell where they stood, silent statues of white crystal. Only Jarek and Eldon remained. The frost stopped an arm's breadth from Jarek's boots, as though held back by unseen force. Sereth's gaze softened. "You are bound to me," she said. "You carry the seed of the Greenseer who sealed my heart in ice. When his line dies, the pact ends, but you broke the seal while still alive, and now all that was frozen begins to stir." Jarek's breath came quick. "The others, the White Walkers, they've waited for you." Her smile faded. "They are my jailers as much as my servants. They fear me, for I was made from what they cannot master. They remember the old war, when the children of the forest called upon me to turn their enemies to stone and snow, when I turned upon them instead." Eldon coughed weakly. "Why wait? If you have such power, why sleep for ages?" Sereth looked to the sky, where faint green light shimmered like ghosts. "The pact held me. The magic of your blood bound my spirit to silence. Only when the world forgets the old tongues, only when the Greenseer's air calls my name, could I wake once more. And now?" She looked again to Jarek. "You have called." Jarek shook his head. "I didn't mean, but you did," she whispered. "And so the dawn of winter begins anew." The ground quaked beneath them. Far to the north, an echoing cry rose, a sound that chilled even her immortal heart. The White Walkers were on the move again, hundreds, thousands of them. Their voices joined in a terrible, icy chorus. Sereth turned her gaze toward that sound, and a shadow crossed her face. "They come to kill me," she said, "or to serve me once more. It matters little which." Then she looked upon Jarek with something like sorrow. You will come with me, blood of the binder. Only your heart can close what has been broken." He raised his sword, though his hands trembled. "And if I refuse, then the world will freeze." The snow began to fall again, heavier this time, each flake gleaming like shards of crystal. Behind her, the broken ice door pulsed faintly, and through the mist, dark figures began to gather, tall, slender shapes with eyes of blue fire. The White Walkers had come. And as they drew near, Yarrick realized with dread that even they slowed their steps, their movements cautious, wary. They did not come to attack her. They came to kneel. One by one, the others bent the knee before the Queen of Frost, their blue eyes flickering in reverence and fear. Sereth raised her pale hand, and the storm itself seemed to bow. "The long night was but a dream," she said softly. "Now let it wake." And Jarek Snow, last of the Green Seer's blood, knew that his life would end before this tale found its end, unless he could learn the truth of how his ancestor bound her once before. The storm thickened until sky and earth were one swirling chaos of white. The Rangers' camp was gone, buried beneath drifts of snow. Only Jarek, Eldon, and the Frost Queen stood in that hollow of ice, surrounded by the silent army of the dead. The White Walkers knelt, their tall forms bowed before Sereth as though before a goddess reborn. Jarek could scarcely breathe. The air itself felt heavy, sharp as shattered glass. Frost crept up the blade of his sword, and the light within the steel dimmed. He tried to move, but his limbs trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of what he beheld. Sereth turned her eyes upon her kneeling servants. The faintest breath escaped her lips, and every sound in the ravine fell still. "Long have you watched," she said, her voice a low song that rippled through the ice. "Long have you waited. Tell me, why do you kneel?" The nearest of the White Walkers rose, its armor glimmering with pale fire. Its voice was the sound of wind over frozen lakes. "We kneel because the pact still binds. You were sealed, O Frost Mother, but your will never died. The wall rose, the world turned to memory and dust, yet we guarded your prison as commanded." Sereth's gaze was unreadable. Guarded or feared? The creature did not answer. Its hand tightened on the hilt of its crystalline blade, and frost cracked beneath its feet. Eldon groaned softly beside Jarek, blood still seeping from the stump of his hand. "They're monsters," he rasped. "You talk to them as though they were men?" Sereth's white eyes slid to him, and for an instant her expression softened, not with pity, but with curiosity. "They were men once," she said. "Before the first men set foot upon these lands, before names or kings or oaths. I remember their cries when the children of the forest bound them with my breath. They were made to serve, to kill, to freeze the hearts of those who defied the old powers, and they have done so, faithfully, even in my slumber." Jarek's hand tightened around his sword. "If you are their queen, why do they fear your waking?" Sereth's gaze turned distant, her voice little more than a whisper. "Because they remember the first war, when I turned against my makers. The walkers were born to serve death, but I am not death. I am endurance, the stillness after all things fade. When I rose in the age before the wall, I sought to claim the living world, to make it quiet and pure, untouched by the fire of men or gods. But my children," her eyes flickered to the walkers, "sought dominion instead. I sought silence. They sought conquest." A rumble shuddered through the ice, deep and low, like a heartbeat in the earth. The blue flames in the walker's eyes flickered. Jarek spoke through clenched teeth. "If what you say is true, Then what do you want now? She looked at him, and for the first time, he thought he saw something human within her cold beauty. To finish what was begun, to unmake the fire that keeps the world alive, to bring peace eternal. But I cannot act while bound. The blood of your line holds me yet. Eldon spat weakly into the snow. Then die with your peace. Sareth tilted her head. He is brave, she said softly. Brave and broken. Shall I ease his pain? Don't touch him, Jarek said sharply. She regarded him for a moment longer, then lowered her hand. As you wish. Blood of the binder. The nearest White Walker stirred. He is mortal, it hissed. He bears the warmth that you forbade us to feel. Let us end him. Sareth's gaze hardened. No, his blood is the key. The creature hesitated, then fell silent. Jarek's thoughts spun. The blood of the binder. He remembered the tales told by old maesters of the last green seer of the children, a man who had bound the darkness in the far north with runes of obsidian and the power of his own heart's blood. That blood, she claimed, flowed in him. But how? He had been raised a bastard of the North, sworn to the Watch. His mother's name was forgotten, his father's unknown. Could some ancient thread of that lost magic have found its way into him, across the centuries? Sareth's voice broke his thoughts. You will come with me, she said. There is a place beneath the roots of the world where the pact was sealed. We go there, and you will choose. Bind me again, or free me forever. I will not help you, Jarek said. She smiled faintly. You will. All things born of fire and flesh fear death. And what is death but rest in my embrace? She turned to the walkers. Guard him. Do not harm him. The others. She nodded toward the statues of frozen rangers. Let them sleep. The walkers obeyed. A ring of icy warriors closed around Jarek and Eldon. One stepped forward and offered Sareth a sword forged of blue crystal. She took it in her pale hands and held it up to the cold light. Come, she said. The night grows old, and dawn has no place in the world that waits. They began to move northward across a plain of endless ice. The storm followed them like a shroud. The walkers glided across the snow, leaving no mark behind. Sareth walked at their head, her long hair trailing like mist. Jarek stumbled after them, half dragging Eldon, whose strength was fading. Hours passed, perhaps days. The sun never rose, only a pale twilight that hovered beyond the horizon. Strange shapes moved within the mists, giant bones frozen in glaciers, silent hulks of forgotten beasts, ruins buried beneath frost. Once, as they crossed a frozen river, Jarek glimpsed movement beneath the ice, pale faces staring up at him, eyes open, mouths silent, the dead of ages past, trapped in their glassy tomb. He tore his gaze away, sickened. At last they reached a place where the land split open, a vast chasm cutting deep into the earth. Steam rose from its depths, mingling with the snow. The air was warmer here, though the warmth felt wrong. Ancient, breathless, like air that had never touched the sun. Sareth paused at the edge. Here, she said, the hollow of binding, the heart of the old world. The walkers formed a circle around the chasm, their blades raised. The light from their weapons bled into the mist, painting the air in shades of blue and white. Jarek felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the ground itself pulled at his blood. Sareth turned to him. The choice is yours, child of the pact. Seal me again, and the world may burn for another 1,000 years before the cold returns. Free me, and it will know peace everlasting. Her words seemed to echo from every stone. The walkers shifted restlessly, uneasy. Eldon, barely standing, grasped Jarek's arm. "Don't listen," he gasped. "You'll damn us all. Bind her, whatever it takes." Jarek looked into her eyes. "How do I bind you?" She smiled sadly. "With the blood that awoke me. With your life." He froze. "You mean—" "Yes," she said. "To bind the queen, the binder must die." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind moaned through the chasm like the sigh of an ancient god. Then, far to the south, a horn sounded, a deep, distant call that rolled across the ice. The walkers turned as one, their heads lifting. Sereth's gaze darkened. The watch has come. And from the horizon, black figures appeared through the storm. Riders in sable cloaks, their torches burning gold against the snow. The night's watch had followed. The walkers drew their blades. The Frost Queen raised her hand, and the storm screamed to life once more. Jarek stood between two dooms, the fire of men and the ice of gods, and knew that the fate of the realm would soon be written in his blood. The horn's cry rolled across the frozen waste, echoing through the chasm, until the cliffs themselves seemed to tremble. The sound was both distant and near, alive with the fury of men who refused to yield to the cold. Jarek knew that call. It was the horn of the night's watch, long and low, the sound of the living coming to stand against the dark. The walkers stirred uneasily, their eyes flaring blue. The storm thickened, answering the will of their queen. Sereth raised one hand, and the wind obeyed her, whirling into a spiral of snow and ice that swallowed the horizon. The advancing torchlights flickered and dimmed in the distance. "They will die," she said softly, her voice calm, almost tender. "Men always die when they chase the storm." Jarek's heart twisted. "They're my brothers." "Your brothers took the vow to guard the realms of men," she said, turning her cold gaze upon him. "But who guards the realm of death? Who guards me?" "You were sealed for a reason," he said. "You would have ended everything." Her white eyes softened, and for an instant, Jarek saw something ancient and weary in them. End is not evil, it is mercy. Do you think the world of men deserves its fire forever? The children made war upon the first men upon themselves, and still they build and burn and bleed. But in my silence there is peace. Eldon, leaning heavily against a block of ice, barked a bitter laugh. "Peace, you call it? I call it nothingness." Sereth's expression did not change. And what is life but a brief rebellion against nothingness? The horn sounded again, closer now, and the storm began to part in brief flashes of light as the black riders pressed forward. The walkers hissed like serpents, their armor chiming faintly in the cold. Jarek stepped forward. "If you wish peace, then stop this. Let them live." Sereth regarded him for a long time. "You bear his courage," she murmured. "The first binder said the same when he raised his hand against me." "Then he was right," Jarek said. "You said the world forgets. Let it forget you again." Her eyes narrowed, and frost spiraled from her fingertips. "Would you sacrifice your life for theirs, as he did? If it would save the realm?" Something flickered across her face. Sorrow, perhaps, or the faintest shadow of love. She turned to the walkers and raised her hand. The wind ceased at once, and silence fell so heavy it seemed to crush the breath from the air. The torches of the watch still burned in the distance, now no more than a mile away. "Let them come," Sereth commanded. "They will see what waits for those who walk beyond their wall." The walkers spread out across the snow in eerie formation, their blades gleaming like shards of starlight. Jarek could see their ranks, hundreds now, maybe more, pouring from the mist like the tide. Eldon staggered forward, gripping Jarek's arm. "You can't reason with her. Do what must be done." Jarek hesitated. He looked at the Frost Queen, her pale form still as the moon, her hair drifting in the windless air. Around her the snowflakes hung suspended, each one glowing faintly, caught in some unseen spell. She was terrible, but she was not mindless. There was something human yet within her, something that could feel pain. "You said my blood binds you," he said quietly. "If I die here, it will end." Her gaze met his, unblinking. "Yes, the blood of the pact closes the gate. My spirit will sleep again until the blood is awakened. And if I live, then the world will know my peace." The sound of hooves reached them now, dozens of horses, their riders shouting above the storm. Jarek could see the black banners snapping in the wind, the gleam of steel, the desperate courage of men who came to face death with open eyes. He turned back to Sereth. "Then it seems I have no choice." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You always have a choice, child of fire." Jarek lifted his sword. "Then I choose to live, and to fight you." For the first time, the Frost Queen's face hardened. The wind shrieked anew, whipping the snow into blinding fury. The ground split beneath Jarek's feet, ice cracking like thunder. The walkers surged forward. Jarek leapt aside as one of them brought down a crystal blade that shattered the earth where he had stood. He drove Frostbane into its chest. The steel, forged and tempered with dragon glass, flared with red light as it met the creature's flesh. The walker screamed, collapsing into shards of frost that melted into the snow. The others howled and advanced. Eldon, though weak, seized a fallen torch and thrust it at a walker that came too close. Flames burst, searing the air. The creature hissed, recoiling. "Go!" Eldon cried. "Find her heart! End this!" Jarek fought his way through the ring of walkers, their swords flashing like lightning. Every strike numbed his arms, every breath cut like a knife. Blood splattered on the snow, steaming briefly before freezing. He caught glimpses of the watch closing in from the south, their torches flickering like stars swallowed by the storm. Sereth stood at the chasm's edge, her arms raised, the air around her alive with blue light. The ice beneath her feet cracked and spread in glowing veins across the ground. "You cannot stop it," she said, her voice ringing through the chaos. "You were born of my silence. Your blood remembers me, even if your heart denies it." Jarek stumbled toward her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Then my blood will end you." He lunged, his sword cutting through the whirling snow. She moved with inhuman grace, catching the blade between her palms. Frost raced along the steel toward his hands, but he held fast, teeth bared. The light from the sword flared red, fighting her blue glow. Steam hissed between them. "You would die for them?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, "and that's why you'll lose." He drove the blade deeper, and for a heartbeat, their eyes met. His filled with fire, hers with ancient sorrow. The sword pierced her chest. The world exploded in light. The storm screamed and the ice cracked open. The walkers faltered, their blue eyes flickering out one by one as if snuffed by an unseen hand. The chasm roared beneath them, spewing mist and shards of light. Jarek fell to his knees, blinded, as the Frost Queen staggered back, the blade buried to the hilt in her heart. She looked down at the wound, then at him. "You are your ancestor's heir," she whispered, "and his curse." Her form began to dissolve into snow and mist. The blue glow in her eyes dimmed to white. "When your line dies, I will wake again." Her hand brushed his cheek, cold as death. and then she was gone, scattered to the wind. The storm broke. The clouds thinned, revealing a gray sky touched by the faintest hint of dawn. The walkers were gone, their bodies melted into drifting frost. Jarek collapsed beside the chasm, his strength spent. Eldon limped to his side, his face pale. Is it over? Jarek looked out across the frozen waste where the watch's torches flickered nearer. For now. He looked down at his hand. The wound from her touch was faint, but burning with a blue-white mark that pulsed like a heartbeat. Beneath the ice, deep and unseen, something still stirred. The world was quiet again, but the silence was not peace. The White Walkers had waited for thousands of years because they feared her. And now, though she was gone, the frost remembered her name. The sun was weak that morning, a pale disk wreathed in thin cloud, spilling no warmth upon the endless white. It rose uncertainly over the shattered ravine, and for the first time in living memory, the storm above the far north began to fade. Jarek woke to stillness. His every bone ached. His sword lay beside him, half buried in snow, its blade rimed with frost. The world smelled of iron and ice. When he lifted his head, he saw the black shapes of riders picking their way through the drifted waste. The Night's Watch, what few had survived the storm's wrath. Eldon knelt beside him, his face wan and drawn, his wounded arm bound in strips of cloak. "You're alive," he rasped, half in disbelief. "I thought she'd taken you with her." Jarek pushed himself upright, grimacing. "She's gone, for now." Eldon's eyes followed his to the chasm, where the ice had sealed again. No trace remained of the Frost Queen or her shimmering host, only silence, and a faint glimmer deep beneath the ice, as if the world itself remembered her. When the riders reached them, Jarek recognized Lord Commander Harlan, a grizzled man whose beard was white as snow. His black cloak was torn, his horse lathered with frost. "By all the gods," Harlan muttered, staring at the devastation. "What happened here, Snow?" Jarek's voice was hoarse. "We found what shouldn't be found, a queen of frost, bound since the Dawn Age. I broke the seal." The Lord Commander's weathered face hardened. "And you lived to tell it. Then the gods aren't done with you yet." He surveyed the field, the shattered ice, the bodies of men and things long dead. "We'll burn what we can and ride south. The wall must know." Eldon spat into the snow. "If there's anything left to tell, you didn't see what she did." Harlan met his gaze. "I've seen enough to fill 100 nightmares. Come, we've lingered in cursed ground long enough." They built pyres from frozen driftwood and broken spears. When the torches were lit, the flames sputtered and hissed, fighting the cold. Smoke rose, dark and thin, carried off by the northern wind. Jarek watched the fire consume the last remains of the walkers, their flesh melting into pale mist that vanished into the air. As the last pyre burned low, he knelt beside the ice chasm. The faint light beneath still pulsed, slow as a heartbeat. He laid his hand upon the frozen surface. It was cold, but not dead. "Sleep," he whispered. "Let the world forget you again." The light dimmed, as though answering his plea, but the mark on his palm burned brighter, that pale blue-white scar left by her touch. That night, they made camp beneath a low ridge of stone. The sky above was strange, streaked with green fire, the aurora dancing like ghosts. The brothers spoke in low voices around the flames, their fear thick as the smoke. Eldon sat close to Jarek. "She said you bore the blood of her binder," he murmured. "Do you think it's true?" Jarek stared into the fire. "I don't know. My mother spoke little of her kin, only that they were from the Wolfswood, near the ruins of the first men's forts. If what she said is true, maybe that blood still flows in me." Eldon gave a humorless laugh. "Then may the gods have mercy on us all. What kind of curse is that to carry such a thing in your veins?" Jarek said nothing. He watched the flames, and for a moment, in their dance, he thought he saw her face again, pale and sorrowful, eyes like white fire. "When your line dies, I will wake again." He turned away, jaw clenched. "She isn't gone. I can feel her. Somewhere beneath the ice, she dreams." The following days were a blur of cold and hunger. They rode south through the forest of dead pines, past frozen rivers and ancient stones carved with runes long forgotten. Each night, Jarek dreamt of her voice whispering in the wind. He would wake with frost on his lashes, though no snow had fallen. Once, as they crossed a frozen lake, the ice beneath his horse cracked, and a pale light flickered in the depths. He saw faces there, not the dead, but the unborn, shadows stirring in the frost. He spurred his horse forward, refusing to look again. At last, the wall rose before them, vast, unyielding, a mountain of ice reaching to the sky. Its surface shimmered faintly in the dim light, alive with trapped fire. Men on the ramparts hailed them as they approached, their black cloaks flapping like wings. They passed through the gate in silence. The air beyond the wall felt different, warmer somehow. The smell of pine and smoke lingered. To most, it would be a comfort. To Jarek, it felt like exile. Lord Commander Harlan wasted no time. He called a council in the hall, where braziers blazed and shadows danced upon the stone. The surviving rangers gathered, hollow-eyed, to hear the tale. Jarek stood before them, recounting all that had passed: the door of ice, the awakening, the queen, the battle, and her vanishing. When he finished, silence filled the hall. At length, Maester Thorin spoke. His beard was long and white, his eyes sharp with fear and curiosity. "A spirit of the Dawn Age," he murmured, "a relic of the pact between the children and the dark. The songs speak of her, though none believed them true. The Frost Mother, the lady beneath the ice. If she stirs again, the wall itself may fail." Harlan turned to Jarek. "Is she truly gone?" Jarek hesitated. "She sleeps, but she will not sleep forever." The Lord Commander's expression darkened. "Then the Watch will do what it has always done. We wait and we watch." Eldon snorted softly. "We've been waiting for thousands of years already, and when she wakes, waiting won't save us." The meeting broke with no comfort. The men dispersed to their posts, leaving Jarek alone with the fire. That night, he climbed to the top of the wall. The wind was sharp, the stars hard and clear. Below him stretched the frozen north, endless and still. He stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet until a sound reached his ears, faint, distant, like the whisper of a woman's breath. Jarek. He turned, but there was nothing, only the wind. Yet the mark on his palm glowed faintly through the glove. Far below, in the ice of the far north, a crack spread across the frozen earth, miles from where the queen had fallen. Pale light spilled upward, touching the clouds. In the frost fangs, wildlings woke to see the aurora burn red instead of green. Ravens scattered from the trees. The cold deepened. At Castle Black, Jarek felt it, a pull, a pulse, calling from beyond the wall. He closed his eyes, whispering to the night, "I ended you." The wind answered, soft and mocking, "Did you?" The fire in the watchtower guttered, the stars dimmed. For a single heartbeat, the whole wall trembled, as though something beneath it shifted in its sleep. Jarek stared into the darkness beyond. The storm had ended, but he knew peace was a lie. The White Walkers had waited once before, and they would wait again. He drew Frostbane, its steel faintly gleaming with inner light. "Let them come," he said to the wind. And far to the north, in the frozen dark where no man walked, the first snow of a new winter began to fall. The new winter crept slowly, a silent shadow that none marked until it was too late. Across the north, the air grew colder, the nights longer. Frost came early to the Wolf's Wood, and the rivers that had once carried summer's melt froze solid before the harvest's end. Ravens brought word from the mountain clans, strange lights dancing in the sky, whole valleys swallowed in mist that never lifted. At Castle Black, the fire never went out. The watchmen burned it day and night, for no man wished to see the dark without its light. Jarek Snow kept to himself, spending his hours in the library with Maester Thorin or walking the wall's height when sleep refused him. The scar on his palm still burned with a steady, icy throb, a heartbeat that was not his own. The Lord Commander pretended not to see it, though he saw the change in him. Jarek no longer smiled, nor spoke more than was needful. He ate little. He watched the horizon as though it would soon rise against him. Eldon visited him one night, his stump bound in black cloth. "You can't keep staring into the dark," he said, lowering himself beside Jarek on the cold stones of the wall. "If you keep feeding it your thoughts, it'll feed on them in turn." Jarek gave no answer. The sky to the north glimmered faintly with green and white fire. "She isn't gone," he murmured. "Every night I feel her stir beneath the ice. Sometimes she calls, sometimes she just watches." Eldon made the sign of the seven, though the gods had no power here. "If she's bound, then forget her. Let the cold have its queen, and we'll have the living world." "I tried," Jarek said quietly. "But when I close my eyes, I see the chasm again. The light beneath it pulses with my own blood. She meant what she said. I carry the key that binds her." Eldon looked uneasy. "Then mayhap you should go south, away from the wall, away from her. You're a brother no longer. The Watch would grant you leave after what you've done." But Jarek shook his head. "The cold doesn't heed walls or vows. If she wakes, nowhere in this world will be safe." A gust of wind swept across the wall, howling through the stones. The torches below flickered. From the north came a faint sound, like cracking ice. Both men turned toward it, hearts quickened. Nothing moved, yet the sound did not fade. It came again, long and slow, as though something vast and heavy turned in its sleep. "Seven hells," Eldon muttered. "Tell me you heard that." "I heard," Jarek said, "and it's moving closer." Before dawn, ravens came from the Shadow Tower. Their message was brief. Icequake north of the Frost Fangs. Entire valley sunk. Lights seen in the snow. Send men. Lord Commander Harlan called a council. His voice was grim as the wind itself. "If it's her again, we cannot ignore it. We ride north." Maester Thorin shook his head. "You cannot fight what lies beneath the ice, my lord. The Queen of Frost is bound by spells older than our kind. To stir her again is to invite the long night anew." Harlan turned to Jarek. "You saw her. You fought her. Tell me, boy, do you believe she sleeps?" Jarek hesitated. The hall was silent, every face turned toward him. "No," he said at last. "She dreams, and her dreams shape the cold." That was enough for Harlan. "Then we go. If her power grows, we'll find the source and end it. Gather 20 men. Eldon, you ride with Snow. Thorin, ready the dragon glass and the black oil." Eldon muttered curses under his breath, but he obeyed. By noon, the gates of Castle Black opened once more, and 24 black-cloaked riders vanished into the white wilderness. The journey north was worse than any before. The trees grew twisted and pale, their bark glazed with frost that never melted. The air stank of rot and old magic. Once, they passed a grove where the snow itself bled red from the roots, and the horses shied, refusing to move until Jarek whispered words he did not remember learning. On the 4th night, they made camp by the edge of a frozen river. The moon was full, casting pale light over the endless waste. The men were restless. Whispers moved among them that the forest itself listened. Jarek slept lightly, his sword across his knees. In his dreams, she came to him again. She stood upon a plain of glass, her white hair flowing like smoke. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with wrath, but with sorrow. "You should not have come," she said. "The world forgets for a reason." He tried to speak, but his voice made no sound. She drew near, her breath cold upon his skin. "The seal weakens. My prison breaks with each heartbeat of your blood. When you die, I will sleep again. Until then, I am awake in your shadow." Her hand brushed his cheek, and he woke with a cry. Frost had formed where she touched him, thin and sharp as glass. Eldon was beside him at once, sword drawn. "What is it?" "She was here," Jarek whispered, "in the dream, or something more." Before Eldon could answer, a shout rose from the riverbank. One of the scouts came stumbling through the snow, his face pale. "My lord, the river, it's moving." They ran to the water's edge. The ice was cracking, long fissures spreading across its surface. Beneath the frozen skin, something glowed, blue light, swirling like fire. The men backed away, but Jarek stepped closer, drawn by the hum that pulsed through the air. It was the same rhythm he'd felt beneath the ice in the north, a heartbeat, vast and ancient. "Snow!" Eldon barked. "Get back!" Too late. The ice gave way beneath him. He fell into darkness and cold. The water was not water at all, but living frost, thick and heavy, dragging him down. Shapes moved around him, pale faces, eyes open, lips whispering soundless words. Then came her voice again. "You cannot flee what you carry." A hand seized his wrist, burning like fire through the cold. Eldon's voice echoed faintly above. "Hold on!" With a roar, he was dragged upward, breaking through the ice with a crash. The cold hit him like knives, but he was alive. Eldon hauled him onto the bank, cursing. "You mad fool! You'd have drowned in the snow itself." Jarek coughed, shivering. "She spoke to me again. She's close." Eldon stared at him, fear in his eyes. "Then we're all dead." The river stilled once more, its glow fading. But the mark on Yarek's palm burned brighter than ever, casting faint light through his glove. He looked north, and in the distance, a pale column of light rose into the sky, piercing the clouds. The men murmured, crossing themselves. Harlan's face was set like stone. "That's our path," he said. "Whatever stirs beneath that light, we end it, or die trying." Jarek said nothing. The wind carried her whisper to him again, soft as falling snow. "Come to me, my binder's blood. You cannot end what you are." He looked toward the light until his eyes watered from the cold. The wind rose behind him, carrying the scent of ice and sorrow. The world was slipping toward silence once more, and every heartbeat of his blood brought her closer to waking. Still, he mounted his horse and rode on. For he knew the truth. The White Walkers had waited for their queen, not in loyalty, but in fear. And if he failed to bind her again, that fear would belong to every living soul in Westeros. By the 7th day of their march, the north had grown quiet in a way that chilled the spirit. There were no birds, No beasts, not even the groan of trees in the wind. The snow fell straight and soundless, as if the air itself feared to stir. The men of the watch rode close together, wrapped in their black cloaks, eyes darting to every shadow. The pale column of light they had seen days earlier still burned in the distance, cold and unwavering, piercing the sky like a frozen spear. It seemed no nearer for all their riding, though they pressed north from dawn until the horses trembled beneath them. Jarek led the way, his face pale with exhaustion. The mark upon his palm burned without cease, pulsing in time with his heart. He no longer felt the cold as the others did. The frost that rimed their beards and stiffened their cloaks melted on his skin, and sometimes, when he breathed, the air shimmered faintly white around him. That night, they camped beside a stretch of broken stone that jutted from the snow like the ribs of some long-dead giant. The fire sputtered weakly, its smoke drawn north by the unseen pull of the light. Lord Commander Harlan sat apart, sharpening his blade. The steel caught the glow from the fire, and his eyes reflected it, grim and steady. "When this is done," he said at last, "I'll see the wall strengthened from end to end. I'll double the guard, seal every tunnel, burn every tree that touches the ice." Eldon looked up from where he sat, binding his stump. "And when the snow starts to whisper again, will you burn the wind too?" The Lord Commander's gaze hardened. "If I could." Jarek said nothing. His thoughts were far away, on the frozen woman who haunted his dreams, and the ancient words she had spoken. He felt her presence in the wind, in the faint hum beneath the snow. "You cannot end what you are." He touched the hilt of his sword. Frostbane had grown colder these last days. Its blade no longer gleamed blue, but gray, like dying ice. At dawn, the riders set out once more. The world was endless white. By midday, they reached a valley that should not have been there, a wound in the land carved clean through rock and ice alike. The walls of the valley rose steep and sheer, and at its heart stood a spire of black crystal, taller than any tower. The light that had guided them spilled from it in pale streams that bled into the clouds. The horses balked, refusing to go nearer. Their breath came out in plumes of mist that froze in the air. Even the air felt wrong, thin and sharp, heavy with power. Meister Thorin, who had followed them this far despite his years, stared at the spire with wide eyes. "This is no work of man or child," he said. "This is the root of the pact itself, the place where the first Greenseer bound the dark." Jarek dismounted. "Then this is where she will wake." The men looked at him uneasily. No one spoke. He took a torch from Eldon's hand and led the way down into the valley. The snow there was strange. It shimmered faintly, though no sun reached it. As they walked, they passed statues half buried in the drifts. Figures of men and women carved from ice, their faces twisted in terror. Some wore the remnants of black cloaks. Eldon drew his dagger, whispering, "The last ones who came here, perhaps." The maester bent to touch one, then drew his hand back sharply. "Not carved," he said hoarsely, frozen in an instant. The air grew colder still as they neared the spire. It was smooth and flawless, its surface clear as glass, and deep within, faint shapes stirred. At first they seemed like shadows, but as the light shifted, Jarek saw faces, hundreds of them, pressed against the inside, eyes open, mouths moving in silent screams. He felt the mark on his hand blaze, his knees weakened. "She's in there," he whispered, waiting. Harlan's voice was steady. "Then end it, boy. Whatever blood she bound you with, use it now, before she wakes." Jarek took a trembling breath. "If I die, she sleeps again. But if the seal's broken before that..." Eldon stepped forward, Then you die for nothing. Jarek met his gaze. You'd rather the world burn? The storm began then, sudden and violent. Wind tore through the valley, shrieking like 1,000 voices. The snow rose in a whirl around the spire, and from its surface came a sound, a low, endless note, like the cracking of the world. The black crystal split from base to crown, light poured out, white and blinding. The men staggered, shielding their eyes. When it faded, she was there. Sereth stood upon the snow as though she had always been there, her form pale and terrible. Her eyes were no longer white but filled with shifting light, like fire behind ice. Her hair flowed in the wind, and her voice was the whisper of 1,000 winters. "You came," she said. "You could not stay away." Jarek felt the pull again, the same ancient tether that had drawn him north. "You called me." She smiled faintly. "I did not need to. You were made to return." The walkers came then, rising from the snow like ghosts. They gathered around her in silence, their blades of ice reflecting her light. They did not kneel this time. They watched. "Do you see?" she asked softly. "Even they know what must come. They feared me once, but no longer. I am not their queen now. I am their kin. The fire that bound them fades. Soon the wall itself will remember its first song." Harlan drew his sword. "If she's your kin, then you'll die with them." Sereth turned her gaze on him, and frost blossomed across his blade. "Men of the Watch," she said, "you guard the realms of men, yet you stand at the edge of the world, serving a promise you do not understand. That promise was mine long before your order was born. I built your wall with my breath and sealed it with my tears." The maester's voice trembled. "It cannot be. The wall was raised by Brandon the Builder." Sereth's smile was thin and cruel. "And who taught him the craft of ice? Who whispered the runes that bind cold to stone? He was but a child when I found him, a child who wept for a world at war." She looked again to Jarek. "Your blood remembers. My binder's line cannot escape me. You woke me once, now you will free me." Jarek stepped forward, gripping Frostbane. "I won't. Not again. Then you will die, and another of your blood will take your place." "I'm the last," he said. "There is no other." Her eyes flickered, uncertain for the first time. "Then you will do." She moved with the swiftness of storm winds, crossing the snow in a blur of light. Jarek raised his sword, and steel met ice. The shock drove him backward, the ground splitting beneath them. Sparks of blue and red light filled the air as their blades clashed. Eldon charged, torch in hand, and struck her with flame. Fire licked her cloak, and she screamed, a sound that shook the sky. The walkers hissed and fell upon the men, blades flashing. The valley became a whirl of chaos and light, snow stained with blood. Jarek fought like one possessed. He struck again and again, driving her back toward the spire. "Sleep," he gasped. "Sleep." She caught his wrist, her touch freezing his flesh to bone. "You cannot bind me twice," she hissed. He looked into her eyes and saw not hatred, but grief so vast it swallowed everything. "Then let it be once and forever." He drove Frostbane into his own chest, through the burning mark. The sword blazed white, brighter than any sun. Sereth screamed as light burst from her and from him, mingling until they were one blinding flame. The walkers fell where they stood, shattering like glass. When the light faded, the valley was still. The spire was gone. Where it had stood, only frost remained, glittering beneath the dawn. Eldon staggered to his knees. Jarek lay upon the snow, his eyes closed. The mark upon his palm faded at last. The maester whispered a prayer. He bound her again. Eldon looked north, where the light had been. "Aye," he said. But for how long? The wind rose, carrying with it a single whisper, soft as falling snow, until the blood runs cold once more. And beyond the wall, beneath 1,000 tons of silent ice, the world waited. For a time there was peace, not the peace of summer or of the hearth, but the cold, clean silence that follows a storm. The world seemed to hold its breath. The snows deepened, yet they no longer burned with that strange blue light. The auroras faded from the sky. Ravens returned to the trees, and the wind lost its whispers. In the shadow of the wall, the brothers of the night's watch buried their dead. They burned what could burn, and for the rest they raised cairns of stone and frost. At the heart of the field they laid Jarek Snow, wrapped in black, his sword across his chest. The blade was dark again, stripped of all light, and the scar on his hand had turned to pale crystal. Lord Commander Harlan spoke the words himself, his voice low and rough. He was a brother of the Watch, he said, and though no crown adorned his brow, he kept the realm from ruin. Let the fire remember him, and let the cold forget. When the pyre was lit, the flames rose bright against the gray sky. The men stood in silence, watching the smoke curl upward and fade into the falling snow. Eldon did not speak. He stood apart, his face lined with grief. He carried the hilt of Frostbane, its blade shattered when Jarek fell. The Meister said the sword's heart had been forged from dragon glass and bound by blood magic, and when that bond broke, so too did the steel. Eldon thought of melting it, but could not bring himself to part with it. Instead, he buried the hilt beside Jarek's cairn and whispered a prayer no Septon had ever taught him. That night, the brothers gathered in the hall. The fire crackled, and for the first time in many moons, they drank without fear of shadows. Meister Thorin sat by the hearth, his wrinkled hands folded around a cup of wine. "The wall stands," he said softly, "and she sleeps once more. Perhaps the long night will never come again." Eldon gave a hollow laugh. "You sound like a fool, Meister. The long night always comes again." Thorin looked at him, eyes glinting. "And yet men always rise to meet it. That too is part of the tale." Eldon stared into the flames, saying nothing more. The wine burned his throat, but it did not warm him. He thought of the valley where Jarek had fallen, of the way the light had swallowed both man and queen. He could still feel it when he closed his eyes, the echo of that blinding fire, until the blood runs cold once more. He left the hall before dawn and climbed the steps to the wall. The wind was sharp, the stars pale above him. From that height, the north stretched endless and dark, silent beneath its shroud of snow. "Watch over us, Snow," he murmured. "You earned your rest." But as he turned to go, a raven landed on the parapet beside him. Its feathers were rimed with frost, and its eyes gleamed pale blue in the moonlight. It croaked once, and from its beak fell something small, a single shard of ice, no bigger than a coin. Eldon picked it up, frowning. It pulsed faintly, cold against his palm. When he looked up again, the raven was gone. He did not speak of it to the others, yet that night he dreamed of the Frost Queen standing upon a sea of glass. Her eyes open once more. Behind her rose the wall, not white but black, its heart filled with fire. She looked at him and said, "The blood sleeps, but the world remembers." He woke drenched in sweat, though the room was cold as a tomb. The shard lay on the table beside his bed, untouched and glowing faintly. Over the days that followed, strange tidings reached Castle Black. Wildlings fleeing south spoke of cracks in the glaciers, of rivers freezing solid overnight, of lights beneath the ice. A band of rangers sent to investigate never returned. The Lord Commander ordered another ranging, but this time none would volunteer. Even the most hardened among them felt it. The air was changing. Eldon sought out Maester Thorin, who was hunched over a pile of scrolls in the library tower. "You said she sleeps," Eldon began. "Then why does the north still bleed cold?" Thorin sighed. The queen was bound by blood. When Yarrick gave his life, the bond was sealed again. But no magic lasts forever. The world turns, and so too do the bindings that hold it together. Her prison weakens with each age. "So it starts anew," Eldon muttered, "and we're left to wait until the next fool wakes her again." The maester's expression was grave. "Perhaps not wait. There may be a way to strengthen the seal without her blood. The old texts speak of a relic, the heart of winter, lost in the far north beyond the frost fangs. It was part of her when she was first bound, a fragment of her own power, torn away by the green seers." Eldon frowned. "And you think it still exists?" "If it does, and we can find it, perhaps we can end her sleep forever." It was madness, he knew. But the shard that the raven had brought still pulsed faintly, and when he held it close, he could feel it tugging him northward. 3 days later, Eldon rode through the gate, leading a small band of 6 brothers. The wall's shadow fell behind them, long and dark, stretching across the snow like a scar. They followed the trail of frozen rivers and pale lights. The cold grew worse than any they had known. Even their breath froze on their beards like shards of glass. Once they found a camp of wildlings, every man and child turned to stone by frost. Another night, they saw figures walking far out on the ice, tall and white, moving without sound. By the 10th day, only 4 men remained. They reached a valley where the snow fell upward, rising into the sky like smoke. In its center stood a mound of black stone, smooth as glass, half buried in the drift. Eldon dismounted and knelt beside it. The shard in his hand glowed brighter. "This is it," he breathed. The others began to dig, their shovels clanging against the rock. The air hummed, low and deep, and the snow around them stirred as though alive. Then the stone cracked, and light spilled from within, white and blinding. The brothers fell back. Eldon reached into the light and drew out a crystal heart the size of a man's fist. It pulsed faintly, alive. Within it swirled clouds of frost and shadow, and faint voices murmured, just beyond hearing. "The heart of winter," whispered one of the men. Before Eldon could answer, the ground trembled. The snow split open, and a cold wind rose from the depths below. He turned and saw her. Sereth stood upon the ridge above them, pale as death, her eyes burning white. She wore no crown, no cloak of frost, only the cold itself. "You carry what was mine," she said. Her voice was neither anger nor command, but sorrow so deep it froze the soul. "Give it to me, and I will let you rest." Eldon raised the heart. "You were bound." She smiled faintly. "Did you think death would stop the cold? He sleeps within me now, as I once slept within him. Blood and frost are one again." At her feet, the snow darkened, spreading outward like ink. The other men fled, but Eldon stood fast. "You cannot have it. Not while I live." "Then you will join him," she said gently. The wind roared, and the world turned white. When the storm cleared, the valley was empty. Only the black mound remained, and upon it, frozen in ice, lay the heart of winter, glowing brighter than before. Far to the south, at Castle Black, the ravens screamed and would not rest. The wall trembled, and from its depths came a sound that had not been heard for 1,000 years. the slow, steady beat of a heart. The Frost Queen was waking once more, and this time she would not sleep alone. When the first raven returned to Castle Black, its wings were torn and its feathers white with frost. The bird did not speak, but dropped dead upon the Lord Commander's table, its eyes glazed with thin sheets of ice. When the Maester pried open its beak, he found a scrap of black cloth frozen within, a strip cut from the cloak of the Night's Watch, marked with the sigil of Eldon Pike. The hall was silent as Lord Commander Harlan read the message stitched there in clumsy letters of blood. She walks again. From that moment, the wall seemed colder. Fires burned lower, and even the Black Brothers whispered as they passed beneath its shadow. Some said the ice itself was whispering now, murmuring like a dying man's breath. Jarek's cairn stood untouched in the yard, a mound of snow-capped stones with his broken sword thrust into its peak. At dawn, the sword was found rimed with frost that glowed faintly blue. Lord Commander Harlan summoned Maester Thorin, his voice low. "You told me the seal was strong," he said. The Maester's old hands trembled over the parchment scrolls. It was, for a time. But when Jarek's blood joined hers, the bond was remade, not ended. He became part of her, as she of him. If she walks again, it may be that she does not walk alone. The commander's face hardened. "You mean she bears him with her?" Thorin hesitated. "In some form. If the blood of the binder and the frost are one, then his spirit may have become the bridge between worlds. The gate is open again." Harlan turned toward the window slit. Beyond it lay the endless white, stretching north to the horizon. "Then we'll seal it with steel if need be." But no steel could seal what was no longer bound by flesh. That night, a storm rose from the north, blacker than pitch. It swept across the wall, shaking the stones, tearing flags from their poles. The watchmen lit every brazier, every torch, but the wind devoured the flames. Within that roaring darkness came voices, hundreds, whispering in tongues older than men. When dawn broke, the storm was gone, but every torch had burned out, and the wall itself had changed. Faint lines of light ran through the ice, blue and white, forming patterns like veins beneath the surface. The Maester traced them with a shaking hand. "These are runes," he said. "Ancient ones, sigils of calling." "Calling what?" Harlan asked. Thorin's face was pale as snow. "Her." Far to the north, in the valley of Black Stone, the storm had passed as well. The ground lay still, the air brittle and thin. At the center of that desolation, where once had stood the mound and the heart of winter, there now lay a woman, pale, clothed in torn shadow. Her hair, once white as frost, was streaked with ash. Her eyes, when they opened, were gray, not the void white of the Frost Queen, but the storm gray of the north. Sareth breathed, and her breath steamed in the cold. She felt the weight of the world pressing upon her, the silence of centuries broken. Her heart beat, slowly, painfully. "He sleeps within me now." She rose to her feet, unsteady, clutching at the snow. Her hand bled, red against the white, and she stared at it in wonder. Warmth, pain, life. She had not felt these things since the first dawn of the world. The valley was empty save for one thing: the heart of winter lying cracked upon the ground, its light dim. She knelt and touched it. The crystal was cold, but within its depths something stirred. A flicker of blue, a shadow moving behind the frost. His voice came faint and broken. "Why did you wake?" She closed her eyes. "Because I cannot rest while the world forgets." "We should have slept," came Yarek's voice again, weak as wind. The binding was mercy. She bowed her head. "You gave your life to seal me, yet your blood was stronger than death. I could no more destroy you than you could destroy me. We are bound, frost and fire, forever at war." "Then end it," the voice said. "End us both." Sareth looked north to where the horizon bled pale light. "Not yet. The world still burns. Until it learns silence, we must endure." She rose. Around her the snow began to shift, whispering as it moved. From beneath it rose the dead, white figures with hollow eyes, drawn by her presence. But these were not the walkers of old. Their eyes burned gray, not blue, and their steps left blood upon the snow. "You are mine no longer," she said to them. "You are his." The dead turned their heads toward her, awaiting command. "We go south." At Castle Black, the nights grew longer still. The men whispered that they saw faces in the wall, shapes frozen within the ice that seemed to move when the wind blew. One night, a sentry vanished from the top of the rampart, leaving only a trail of frost where his boots had been. Then came a message from East Watch by the sea. The water had frozen solid, and ships lay trapped in the harbor, their crews entombed where they slept. Lord Commander Harlan called the brothers to the yard. "The north stirs again," he said. "We cannot wait for death to climb our walls. We ride at first light." Eldon's name was carved upon the wall of the fallen, but his body was never found. Still, Harlan felt the man's presence when he turned toward the gate, as though ghosts watched from the shadows. Before dawn, they rode out, 50 men in black, torches blazing, their horses' breath thick with frost. The wall loomed behind them, vast and silent. The snow was falling softly when they found the first of the bodies, a wildling chief, frozen in mid-step, eyes open, a look of awe upon his face. His heart had been torn from his chest, leaving a hollow cavity filled with ice. They pressed on. By the third day, the air shimmered faintly. The storm that had once been a line on the horizon now stood before them like a wall of glass. Light flickered within it, shapes moving, human and not. "By the 7, murmured one of the rangers. "It's the end of the world." The storm parted. Sareth stepped forth. Her cloak of frost flowed behind her, and around her walked the gray-eyed dead. In her hands she held the heart of winter, its light pulsing weakly. The watchmen drew their swords, but the Lord Commander raised his hand. "Hold," he said. "Let her speak." Sareth looked upon him, and for an instant her gaze softened. "You are brave," she said, "but your courage feeds the fire. The world burns because men cannot cease their striving." Harlan's voice did not shake. "We live because we strive. Take that from us, and there is nothing left." Her expression grew sorrowful. "Then you will die for what you are." She raised the heart. Its light blazed blue once more, and the earth split. The dead surged forward like a tide. Steel clashed with ice, and screams filled the air. Harlan struck down one, then another, but for each that fell, 2 rose in its place. The snow ran red. Above the slaughter, Sareth's eyes shone brighter. The heart flared in her hands, and in that moment, she felt Jarek stir again within her. "End it," he whispered. "Now." Her breath caught. "I cannot. You must." The light grew blinding. The heart cracked. A sound like thunder rolled across the land, and the storm itself seemed to die. When the light faded, she stood alone once more. The dead were gone. The watchmen lay scattered in the snow, their torches extinguished. The heart of winter lay broken at her feet, its light fading into darkness. She sank to her knees, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I was not made to end, only to wait." And somewhere deep within her, Jarek's voice answered, faint but steady. "Then wait we shall, until the world remembers us again. The wind rose, carrying snow across the plain. When it settled, there was no sign of her, only ice, clear and perfect, like a mirror reflecting the sky. Far behind, the wall shuddered once and fell silent. The White Walkers had waited once for their queen. Now the world itself would wait for her return. The snows never truly stopped after that battle. They softened for a season, then hardened again, creeping farther south each year. In Winterfell, the weirwood leaves withered and turned to stone. The Starks said little of it, though the heart tree's face seemed to glisten with frost even in midsummer. Ravens came less often from the wall, and when they did, their eyes were white as pearls. Maester Thorin wrote by firelight in the dim hall of Castle Black, though the fire no longer warmed him. His ink froze if he lingered too long between words. "The wall breathes," he wrote in his cracked hand. "It sleeps, but does not dream. The heart beneath it beats still." He paused, listening. Faintly, through the walls of ice, he could hear that heartbeat, a low, steady pulse, like the slow tolling of a distant drum. Outside, the watch had dwindled to a handful. They patrolled the yards, speaking little, lighting the braziers each night out of habit rather than hope. The wall's face shimmered faintly now, alive with veins of light that pulsed when the moon rose. Some said the face of a woman was trapped within, weeping. Others claimed to see a man beside her, his hand upon her heart. Lord Commander Harlan had not returned from the valley. The few who lived said that the Frost Queen had taken him north with the rest. Eldon was lost too, though Thorin sometimes dreamed of him walking the wall, whispering to the ice as if it were a lover. The Maester closed his book and looked to the north. The aurora had returned, green and blue fire twisting across the sky. "So it begins again," he murmured. Far away, where once the sea of ice had lain broken and lifeless, the world stirred. Beneath a sheet of frozen glass, two shadows rested, one dark, one pale. For 1,000 heartbeats they were still. Then the dark one moved. Jarek's eyes opened. He felt nothing at first. No warmth, no breath, no pain. Only silence. The last he remembered was the light swallowing him as frostbane pierced his heart. Now there was only stillness and the faint pulse of another beside him. He turned his head and saw her. Sereth lay motionless, her hair spread like a halo of snow. The light within her chest was faint, but steady. He reached toward her, and his hand passed through ice. He could not tell if he was alive or something less than that, yet her voice came to him, soft as wind. "You should not have followed me. You bound me to you," he said, though he did not speak aloud. "My blood sealed the frost. Where you go, I follow. Then we are both prisoners of our making." He felt a tremor beneath them. Cracks spread through the ice, and pale light bled upward. "The world still moves," he said. "The wall still stands. For now." Her tone was neither cold nor cruel, but tired beyond all measure. "The wall was never meant to last forever. When its ice melts, my kind will be free once more." Jarek closed his eyes. "Then, let it melt with us beneath it." But she only smiled, a faint curve of lips frozen in memory. "You were born of fire, Jarek Snow. You cannot abide the dark forever. When men forget the cold, they will remember you. And through you, me." He wanted to curse her, to weep, to reach through the ice and strike her down again, but his body would not move. He drifted instead, caught between waking and sleep. The frost crept higher, binding him once more. Years passed. Decades, perhaps. The records of the watch grew thin and strange. Maester Thorin's bones turned to dust beside his desk, but his quills kept scratching, guided by a hand of ice. In Winterfell, children told tales of a ghost in black armor who wandered the woods at night, whispering to the trees. Then, one spring unlike any before, the snows melted in a single night. Rivers burst their banks, sweeping ice and stone into the sea. The wall cracked from end to end, a sound like thunder rolling across the north. When the dawn came, the watchmen saw it, a wound splitting the wall's heart, wide enough for a man to walk through. From within poured mist, thick and white, curling like smoke. The wind that followed was cold enough to shatter glass. They sealed the gates and sent word south, but the ravens froze before they crossed the neck. Beneath the ruins of the wall, in the endless caverns of blue ice, the shadows stirred once more. Jarek awoke to light, faint and white. The frost around him cracked and fell away. He drew breath, his first in an age, and it burned his lungs like winter fire. He looked down and saw his hands, pale, scarred, but alive. His chest bore no wound, his heart beat, though slower than it once had. The mark upon his palm glowed faintly, and beside him, Sareth opened her eyes. For a long moment, they stared at one another, neither speaking. The silence between them was the silence of the ages. Finally, she whispered, "We have slept long enough." Jarek's voice was rough. "Then let me sleep still. The world does not need us." She stood, her bare feet touching the ice without sound. The world never needs what it forgets, yet it calls all the same. He followed her gaze upward. Through the fissure above them, a beam of sunlight cut through the ice, a strange golden light that neither of them had seen in centuries. "The sun," he murmured. Sareth looked upon it with wonder and fear. "It remembers us," she said, "and the sun's fire will not spare what I am." She turned away. "Come, there is one last binding yet to make." He hesitated. To what end? To end the war between fire and frost forever. Outside, the northern wind howled through the gap in the wall. The world beyond was green again, the trees returning, rivers running. But men had changed, castles had crumbled, kings had died, and their names were dust. The age that had known the watch was gone. Sareth and Jarek walked among the ruins. The few who saw them fled, taking them for ghosts. At the edge of the forest stood an ancient tree, dead and hollow, its roots twisted into the frozen earth. The last weirwood. Sareth placed her hand upon its bark. "This was where your kind first swore to guard the realms of men," she said softly. "Here we end it." Jarek looked upon her, torn between pity and dread. "What will happen?" "Balance," she whispered. "The frost will sleep in the roots, the fire in the heart. We will rest where both may keep the other still." She pressed her palm to the tree, and light flared beneath her fingers, blue and gold entwined. Jarek felt the pull again, the familiar ache in his chest, the bond that neither death nor time could break. He stepped beside her and laid his hand upon the bark. The world stilled. The wind ceased. The river froze in its flow, and then light swallowed them both. When it faded, the weirwood stood renewed, its bark pale as bone, its leaves half red, half white. From its heart came the faint sound of two heartbeats, one slow and cold, the other strong and warm. Far to the north, the ice ceased its creeping. The wall no longer groaned. The storms broke and rolled away to sea. In Winterfell's Godswood, a boy playing among the roots thought he heard a whisper rise from the weirwood, a man's voice and a woman's, speaking as one. He could not understand the words, but the tone was peaceful. He ran to tell the Maester, but by the time he returned, the whisper was gone. Only the wind stirred the leaves, half crimson, half white, and the snow that fell upon them melted before it could stay. The long night was over. Yet somewhere deep beneath the roots, frost still glimmered faintly in the dark, waiting, patient as memory, for the day when men would forget again. Generations passed. The tales of the watch and the wall faded into legend, then into song, and finally into silence. The north softened. The winters grew short, the rivers wide. Kings rose and fell, their names carved into stone that time soon devoured. Children born in the south no longer believed that a wall of ice had ever stood, nor that dead men once walked beneath the stars. Yet in the far north, beyond the lands where maps still held meaning, the weirwood that stood at the world's edge endured. Its trunk gleamed pale as moonlight, its leaves red and white in equal measure. In summer, its roots bled sap like melted snow. In winter, the ground around it smoked faintly, as though warmth slept beneath. Travelers spoke of strange dreams beneath its boughs, visions of a woman in frost and a man cloaked in shadow. Some claimed to hear a heartbeat beneath the soil. Others said that if one listened closely, the wind there sang with two voices. In that age there lived a boy named Karen, the last of a forgotten bloodline who herded goats along the northern hills. His mother told him the old stories, though few others remembered them. He laughed at the thought of a queen made of ice and a wall that touched the sky. But each winter, when the snows fell thicker and the nights stretched longer, he would find himself drawn northward, toward the lonely tree. One twilight, he went there alone. The forest was silent. Even the wind seemed to wait. The air smelled of snow, though none had yet fallen. When he reached the weirwood, the light of the setting sun struck its bark, turning it to gold. He laid his hand upon it. The wood was warm. Beneath his palm he felt something stir, a faint pulse, deep and slow. He drew back, startled. The heartbeat quickened. Then a whisper rose from the earth, soft and steady, in words he did not understand. The snow began to fall, though the sky was clear. Karen stumbled backward. The red leaves rustled, and from the hollow heart of the tree came a shimmer of light, pale as dawn upon frost. Two figures formed within it, a man and a woman, their bodies woven from mist and memory. The woman's hair floated like smoke. The man's cloak rippled, though there was no wind. "You hear us," the woman said, her voice like the hush of falling snow. Karen fell to his knees. "Who are you?" "The world forgets, but the blood remembers," the man replied. His eyes were gray as storm clouds, and in his hand he carried a blade made of light. "I don't understand," Karen whispered. The woman smiled faintly. "Few ever do. We are the balance that keeps the world from tearing itself apart, fire and frost bound in the roots of the earth." Saren trembled. "Then why do you wake?" The woman's gaze drifted northward. "Because men have begun to burn again." Far away, across the sea, war had returned to the world. Armies clashed beneath banners of gold and crimson. Dragons soared above burning cities. The old magic that had slept for centuries stirred once more, and with it came the ancient cold. Storms rose from the shivering sea, fierce and unnatural. Fishermen vanished amid waves that froze solid in midair. In the capital, scholars argued that it was the breath of the gods. Priests declared it judgment. Only a few remembered the stories: the Frost Queen, the wall, and the man who bound her. In the north, the snow came early. Crops died in the ground, rivers froze, and the northern lights danced crimson instead of green. At the weirwood, the boy Saren returned night after night. He dreamed of the frozen queen and the man of fire. They spoke to him in riddles, of the old blood that flowed in his veins, of a promise that must be renewed. "The balance falters," the man said. "If one side rises, the other must rise as well." "But what can I do?" Saren asked. "I am no king, no knight." The woman's pale hand brushed his cheek. "You are what we were. The binding runs in your blood. When the frost comes again, you will know what must be done." Each dawn he woke with frost on his breath, though the air was still and mild. He grew thin, pale, his eyes taking on the gray of storm clouds. His mother wept and begged him to stop visiting the tree, but he could not. One night he woke to find snow covering the valley. The goats were dead, frozen where they slept. The weirwood glowed faintly in the dark, and voices called him by name. He took his father's knife and walked barefoot into the cold. At the roots of the tree, the man and woman waited. "The time has come," the man said. Karen knelt, shivering. "The frost returns." The woman nodded. "It begins in the east. The seas will freeze. The skies will darken. The world forgets the price of peace. Then how do I stop it?" "You do not stop it," she said softly. "You join it. The binding must be renewed, blood for blood." Karen hesitated. "You mean I must die?" The man's gaze was steady. "All things die. But if your blood seals the frost again, it will sleep for another age." He looked to the woman. "And you? Will you sleep too?" Her expression was sorrowful. "I am the frost. I will always wait." The wind rose, flinging snow across the clearing. Saren's heart pounded. He thought of his mother, of the small house by the river, of the warmth of a fire. He thought, too, of the world that would freeze if he turned away. He lifted the knife. "Tell me it will end." The man laid a hand upon his shoulder. "It never ends, but it waits." Saren nodded. Then he drove the blade into his own chest. Blood splashed upon the roots, bright and steaming. The earth shuddered. The sky tore open with light. The woman's cry rose with the storm, and the world went white. When the snows cleared, the valley was silent. The weirwood stood unchanged, but its leaves were pale now, drained of red. Beneath its roots, ice gleamed faintly in the dark, and within it slept a boy with storm-gray eyes. In the south, the wars ceased as suddenly as they had begun. The dragons fell silent, the seas stilled. The winter that had threatened to swallow the world faded once more. But in the farthest north, where no man walked, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise older than memory. When fire burns too bright, frost shall rise again. When men forget the night, we shall remind them. And so the world turned, balanced once more upon the edge of sleep and waking. The wall was gone, the names forgotten, but the rhythm endured, the endless dance of ice and flame, of death and life, of memory and forgetting. Beneath the roots of the weirwood, two heartbeats echoed still, one slow and cold, the other strong and warm. The Frost Queen and her binder slept once more, their story buried under snow and time. But the wind carried their song to those who would listen, and its words were as old as the world itself. We wait, for that is what the cold does. We wait until the fire forgets us. The snows fell softly upon the ruins of men. Where once proud keeps had stood, only hollow stones remained, half buried in frost. Forests crept over the bones of old kingdoms, and rivers carved new paths through lands long forgotten. The age of men had passed, and the world slept beneath its shroud of white. But not all slept. Beneath the weirwood of red and white leaves, deep in the roots where frost met flame, the two heartbeats still pulsed. Ages turned around them, slow as glaciers shifting. They neither aged nor dreamed, bound together in silence. Then, after 1,000 quiet years, the wind changed. It began as a tremor beneath the ice, a faint hum that spread like a heartbeat through stone and snow. The air grew heavy with the taste of ash. The frost cracked. Warmth bled upward from the depths. And from that warmth came the first fire in centuries. It flared in the southern lands, born from the hand of a people who had forgotten their own blood. They forged steel, raised towers of glass and gold, and spoke of mastery over nature, over time itself. The new kings ruled not by sword or faith, but by fire that burned without end, fire they had stolen from the bones of the earth. They did not know what they had awoken. The frost beneath the weirwood stirred. In the depths, the woman opened her eyes. Sereth, the Frost Queen, no longer glowed with cold light. Her form was shadowed, her skin pale as moonstone. She looked upon the darkness around her and listened. Above, the roots of the weirwood shuddered, whispering of warmth, of flame, of men who defied the balance. Beside her, Jarek stirred as well. His eyes opened, gray as a storm's edge. "The world burns again," he murmured. "I feel it." Sereth's voice was soft, sorrowful. "They have forgotten. The cycle turns once more." Jarek sat up, the frost cracking around him. "Then we must wake." "No," she said, her gaze distant. "We swore to wait. We are the last of what the world feared. If we rise, we will end it." "And if we do not?" he asked. "Then the fire will consume all, and nothing will remain for the frost to save." Sereth's fingers brushed the ice between them. "You always speak of saving Jarek Snow, but you forget. Frost does not save, it remembers." Jarek looked upward. Through the ice above them, faint glimmers of red light bled from the south. Memory will not stop fire. He rose, and the ice groaned beneath him. For the first time in ages, his breath steamed in the cold. He reached for his sword, which lay beside him, its blade clear as glass. Frostbane was reborn, neither dragon glass nor steel, but something older, forged of both flame and ice. Sereth watched him, her eyes full of sorrow. "If you go, you will not return." "Then let that be my end," he said. The ground trembled again. Above, the sky turned crimson as firestorms raged far to the south. The new kings burned forests for their forges, melted mountains for their gold. The air itself grew thick with heat. Sereth closed her eyes. The world forgets, and so the cold remembers. When Jarek emerged from the ice, he found the world changed beyond recognition. The wall was gone, and with it all trace of the old realm. The lands that had once been the north were now a frozen sea. Beyond it, strange fires glowed in the distance, rising from towers that pierced the sky like spears. He walked for days across the barren wastes, following the scent of smoke. Creatures unlike any he had known moved through the mist, tall, twisted shapes of flesh and metal, their eyes red as coals. They fled before him, hissing in fear. In time, he came upon a great city of glass and iron. Its towers burned from within, casting light brighter than any torch. But the light was wrong. It hummed, constant and hungry, never flickering. Men in dark robes moved among the fires, feeding them with strange black stones. Jarek approached their gates, his cloak trailing frost. The guards raised their shining spears, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. "Who comes?" one demanded, his voice distorted by metal. "I am of the north," Jarek said. "I come to warn you. The fire you kindle will wake the frost." The guards laughed, though their laughter was hollow. "There is no frost here, stranger. The cold is dead." Jarek looked past them into the burning city. "Then death is already among you." He raised his hand. Frost spread across the gate, racing up the walls. The laughter ceased. Cracks formed in the iron, and shards of ice fell like rain. The guards cried out, their breath turning to mist. Panic swept the city as the fires began to flicker. The great furnaces that had burned for generations hissed and died, their heat devoured by the spreading cold. From the highest tower, the rulers of the New Age watched in horror as frost crept up the walls. Jarek stood in the square, surrounded by mist and fear. He could feel her now, Sereth, her presence rising beneath the ice, drawn by the heat of the world above. He fell to his knees, the mark upon his palm burning once more. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I could not let them forget." The frost erupted outward, swallowing the city. Towers shattered, rivers froze midstream. The screams of men turned to silence as the world turned white. Far beneath, Sereth felt his life fade. She rose from her slumber and looked upon the frozen expanse above. The world was still again, covered in snow and crystal. The fire had been quenched. She placed a hand upon the ice where Jarek had vanished. "You have kept your vow, binder of frost," she said. "You remembered when I could not." Then she looked to the south, where the last embers of man still glowed faintly in the dark. But the cycle must turn anew. Fire will come again, as it always does. She sank back into the ice, her form dissolving into mist. The frost thickened over her, sealing her once more beneath the roots of the world. Centuries later, when the snows had melted and the rivers ran free again, travelers spoke of a ruin in the far north, a city of glass encased forever in ice. At its heart stood a statue of two figures, a man with a sword of frost and a woman crowned in snow. They faced each other, their hands almost touching, as if caught in the moment between love and ruin, and it was said that when the world grew too warm, the ice around them began to crack, and faint voices whispered through the wind, "Remember us. Remember why the White Walkers waited, for in the end, it was not hatred that had held them back, but fear that one day the world of men would burn so fiercely that even death would have to rise to meet it." In the years that followed the freezing of the last city, the world became quiet once more. Ice ruled again. The oceans lay bound beneath frozen skin, mountains gleamed like knives of crystal. The sky dimmed to gray, and no birds crossed its vault. Yet deep within that silence, something endured. The slow, patient breath of the earth, the pulse of the hidden fire that no frost could kill. Time forgot the shape of men. Where they had built cities, glaciers rose. Their bones lay sealed beneath, their histories pressed into layers of blue and white. Yet in the farthest north, where the frost was deepest, the statues remained. A man with a sword of glass, and a woman crowned in snow, forever reaching toward one another across a gulf of ice. Seasons had no meaning there, nor years. The stars turned, the aurora burned, and still they stood. Then, one night, the ice trembled. It began as a whisper, a crack spreading through stone and frost. The sky flared with strange light, not green or blue, but gold, the color of fire. Deep below the frozen plains, warmth stirred once more. Within the ice, the Frost Queen opened her eyes. Sereth had slept long, dreaming of a world without flame. But now she felt it. Heat, faint but insistent, blooming far to the south. The cycle was beginning again. Men, or something born of them, had found fire once more. She rose from her throne of ice, the air around her singing with cold. For an age she had waited, believing the balance restored. Yet she had always known this moment would come. She felt it through every vein of frost that bound the world, the warmth rising, the whisper of creation turning to hunger again. Fire, she murmured, the words strange upon her tongue. You never sleep long. Beside her, the statue of Jarek began to crack. Frost fell away in slow sheets. His eyes opened, gray and calm, as if he had been waiting for her call. We are bound still, he said. Was this not your wish? Sareth's gaze softened. My wish was peace, yet peace cannot live where memory remains. He stepped forward, the ice groaning beneath his feet. The fire rises again? She nodded. The world turns toward warmth, and warmth will bring life, then war, then ruin. Jarek's expression was unreadable. Then let them have it. Let them build and burn until only ash remains. We have done our part. You would abandon them? I would set them free. But she only shook her head. You cannot unbind what you once swore to guard. You sealed the frost with your blood. That bond endures. He looked down at his hands, pale, unscarred, yet trembling faintly. I am tired, Sareth. She placed her hand upon his chest, where once he had driven the blade that bound them. So am I. For a long time they stood in silence. Then, through the stillness, came a sound, faint and distant, like a song carried on the wind. It was the voice of the world awakening, the first thaw, the first river breaking through ice. They begin again, Sareth whispered. Jarek turned toward the sound. Perhaps this time they will learn. She smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. They never learn. That is why they need us. Far to the south, the first forest sprouted from melting snow. Strange new creatures roamed the thawing plains, their breath steaming in the chill dawn. And among them walked shapes that were not quite men, tall and fair, their skin pale as moonlight, their eyes the color of embers. They built no walls, carried no swords, and yet the world bent gently to their will. They found the ruins of the old world, the buried towers and the bones of kings. In the frozen heart of one fallen city, they uncovered a shard of clear crystal, pulsing with faint light. It hummed in their hands, alive. This was the heart of the old ones, said their chieftain. It remembers. They set it in the center of their camp, and as night fell, its glow deepened. The air grew colder, though no storm blew. Beneath their feet, the earth whispered softly. In the north, Sareth and Jarek walked the endless plain. The wind followed them, sculpting drifts where their shadows passed. The cycle begins anew, she said. Will you fight it? He looked upon her, and the cold in his eyes warmed for the first time in an age. No, I will walk beside it. I will watch. She inclined her head. And I will wait. They came to the edge of the world, where the ice fell away into the sea. The water below was black and still, reflecting the aurora that burned above. Jarek gazed at it for a long while. Do you think there will come a day when this ends? When fire and frost both fade and only silence remains? Sareth's smile was faint. Perhaps. But silence too must be born from something. Even the end begins again. He reached out, his hand brushing hers. For a heartbeat, frost and flame met, and the air shimmered between them. Then, together, they stepped into the sea. The water closed above their heads, and where they vanished, the ocean froze, not with deathly chill, but with light. Beneath its surface, the frost glowed faintly, marking the place where they rested. 1,000 years later, when the new peoples of the thawed lands sailed north in their ships of glass and steel, they found that frozen sea. They called it the mirror of heaven, for it reflected the sky perfectly, even in darkness. Some said that if one stood upon its edge and listened closely, they could hear a heartbeat beneath the ice. slow, steady, eternal. Others told of two shapes, faint as shadows, moving beneath the crystal surface, hand in hand. The wise among them spoke of balance, of flame that gives life and frost that preserves it. They built shrines of snow upon the shore and set crystals within, so that the light of day shone through like stars. And though none knew the names Jarek Snow or Sereth of the Shivering Sea, they told their story still, in whispers and dreams, of two souls who had bound the world, not to rule it, but to remind it. For the world was never meant to be only warm or only cold. It lived in the space between dawn and dusk, life and death, love and fear. And there, beneath the ice, in the calm depths of eternity, the Frost Queen and her binder waited still. Their hearts beat as one, waiting as the White Walkers had waited before them, not for vengeance, nor for dominion, but for the world to remember the lesson that men always forgot, that fire burns too bright without the cold to temper it, and that even winter waits for spring.